As an survivor, I'm sure that you have heard the term talk it out. I'm sure you felt pressure from other people that don't understand your situation to reconcile or at least talk it out with somebody who is abusive. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that is a bad idea. My name is Dr. Felicia. I'm a licensed psychologist and owner of Skill Set Counseling where I focus on identifying spiritual abuse and also recovering from it. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about how people who engage in spiritual abuse, and it's not just spiritual abuse, it's abuse of any kind, will want to talk it out with you. Okay. And I'm going to talk about why that is a trap and it's a setup. Um, the first thing is that when you think about this idea of talking it out, it sounds good, right? You'll hear things like, well, we should, you'll hear these like cliches and platitudes, things about how you should, give people a chance and, hear them out and whatnot. Okay. And so this usually happens after you have set a boundary. So if you can think back to a situation that involved either spiritual abuse or another type of abuse, think about what happened after you set a boundary. Maybe you said you were leaving a spiritually abusive environment or not engaging in like a particular title. You did something where you set a boundary, right? And so what happens in that situation is that abusive people do not like boundaries. I have several videos on this, and they will do everything in their power to try and get through that door you've closed. One way that I see is very dangerous is this idea of talking it out. Talking it out is not something that anybody is owed, right? And so, on one hand, people talk about how ghosting is horrible and stuff like that. And I do think that in some cases it's bad, but I think in some cases it is a self-protection mechanism. You don't owe anybody an explanation for setting a boundary. You don't owe it to an abusive person or somebody you don't want to be in a relationship with to talk things out, right? So I also talk in my videos a lot about humiliation rituals, right? And when you get this invitation to talk it out and hear the other person's side, it is a setup and a trap for you to be pulled into a humiliation ritual. And the reason I say this is because it has happened to me. I don't talk about it a lot in the videos, but yes, I have experienced spiritual abuse, and I see this kind of behavior so often where somebody sets a boundary, and then the abusive person or the system acting on behalf of the person will want you to talk things out, right? That can look several different ways, right? Um, One way that you will see this is you like leaving maybe an environment, right? Maybe you leave like a church or a spiritual group or something, and then the person in charge is like, well, let's talk it out what happened. They probably do know what happened, and if you go back to that abusive person and environment, you are basically going to war on your enemy's territory, right? They are going to be preparing for this meeting. They're going to be thinking about all these things, and they're going to wear you down or humiliate you or both, right? This thing happens very frequently, and it is a manipulation tactic. It's done because it sounds good. Who would say no to talking things out and getting everything on the table and having closure, right? It sounds good in theory, and it works with healthy people where there's a healthy dynamic, but in abusive situations, that is absent, right? So you can't expect things that work in healthy situations and healthy relationships to work in an abusive environment. And so what's going to happen is you're going to go there and then they're either going to shame you for leaving, shame you for setting a boundary, or really try to turn the screws on you so that you walk back what you said or did. So that's very important that you don't go back. Sometimes this can also happen as it's under the guise of like a follow-up, right? So um, I can think I'll tell you a story that happened to me. So there was a situation where I'm trying to think of like how to tell this story, but I think it will be important for you to know, and hopefully it helps you. So there was a situation where it was in a spiritually abusive environment, and there was a concern that I had brought up, and it was a safety concern. And so when I brought this up, I was made to be the problem, right? And a lot of you have talked about how this has happened to you. And so you'll hear cliches like, oh, we have to give people grace, and oh, you know, things like, giving people grace. What's another thing? Giving people the benefit of the doubt. We don't know the whole story, blah, 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 blah. And I just remember sitting in that meeting and being like, I cannot believe that I'm talking, like bringing light to a situation that can result in somebody getting physically harmed. And this is what I'm being told, right? There was a lot of spiritual bypass, a lot of dismissing. And so I just remember being in that meeting and feeling awful and feeling like the concerns that I brought up were completely dismissed. And so the people that said this now said, after I left the meeting, they gave me all the stuff that they said they wanted me to read and listen to, which I didn't. And then they were like, well, we want you to come back to give us an update, right? And I didn't do it. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not giving anybody updates about anything. My response was, I have it handled. And the reason I did that was because I could tell from the very beginning that these people were not interested in hearing anything I had to say. They were more concerned about protecting people that could harm another person, and also maintaining an image that looks good on the outside, but has a lot of problems on the inside. And so another way that you can avoid this is understanding when you need to walk away. Think about a situation where someone is like pulling a rope, right? Tug of war, right? If you ever played tug of war before, one side tugs this way, the other side tugs the other way, and you're going back and forth and back and forth. And so at some point in time, you have to drop the rope, right? And so the metaphor I'm giving here of dropping the rope is the realization that this person is not going to listen to you. And a lot of spiritually abusive people will fake listen, but they're not really listening. They've already determined in their mind that, that they're going to do whatever they want. And so it's very important that you listen to your gut and figure out when that drop the rope moment was. And for me, during that meeting, it clicked for me. I'm like, these people are not interested in my safety, and they're more concerned about, just protecting somebody who's causing harm. And so at that point in time, I dropped the rope. Yeah, I said nothing. Trying to remember like the other things that happened, but basically I didn't engage in back and forth with them. I was going to stop explaining myself, and I did what I needed to do to keep myself safe. So when you think about these invitations to come and talk things out, not only are you going into the enemy's territory, you're also going into a place where you could get ambushed, and where that power differential is going to be even more amplified. So I talk about power differentials a lot when I talk about spiritual abuse. And power differentials I don't believe they always have to be present in a one-on-one situation, but there's always something in which the spiritual abuser or spiritually abusive system is leveraging against you. So even if you are in a situation where you don't see or notice a power differential, if that person is being aided by the spiritually abusive system, then yes, there is, right? And so many of you have talked about how you shared something with somebody who you thought was a friend, and then they went and told, the spiritual leader and whatnot. In that situation, the two of you, it doesn't look like there's a power differential, but there was, because that person is working for the system. And so you have to be very careful when you go into these environments and you hear this invitation to come and talk things out. You don't know who's going to be there, right? You can even ask, but that doesn't mean they have to be honest with you. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that they get more people, right? So that power differential is amplified. So whether, it could be you versus like five or six leaders or people with a lot of power. And so the person who has called you back has told all these people their version of the story, and now you are in that meeting and you feel very caught off guard, right? And so that is why I say don't go back, right? Now, a part of you, I'm sure, is thinking, well, don't I owe them an explanation, right? A lot of times, and this is something that is painful for me to see, is that a lot of victims of spiritual abuse are very tender-hearted and very kind people. And so they assume the positive aspects of themselves operate in other people. So you, as a person, might think, well, gosh, if I hurt somebody's feelings, I want to know about it. So I should do that. But you have to realize that abusive people think very differently from non-abusive people. And I'll probably I think I actually have a video on that, but they're not thinking the same way you are. They don't have the same rules for life as you do. And so you are going into a situation where you're either going to be humiliated, you're going to be outnumbered, and it is a way to kind of put you in your place and get you to submit and go to this to get in line with the agenda of the spiritually abusive environment. So that is why I say don't go back. If you really feel like you need to explain something, you can always do it from a distance, right? You can send an email, you can do a phone call. Phone calls, it's the same thing, right? You don't know what's going on. So I would say if you really feel like you need to do this, maybe write out what you would say via email, and don't send it. Think about it before you send it. And again, the reason I say this is that, there's in the situations that I've seen and that I've counseled, when people go back and explain things, it usually makes things 10 times worse. The people that are telling you to come back and explain things or come back and reconcile are not interested in what best serves you. And how do I know this? Because they're spiritually abusive people, right? They're not going to all of a sudden want to do right by you and do things that are nice and kind simply because you came back and gave them an explanation. And the thing about spiritually abusive people too is that they love to talk up a good game. So they can say they're all about this. Oh, I have these values. Oh, I do this, blah, 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 but they don't. And so when you get into that environment, you're just going to be talked at and you're going to be told a lot of things. And it can be very overwhelming for your nervous system to be in a situation like that. So not only are you putting your mind and your well-being at risk, you're also putting your body at risk. If you think about the what it entails to go into a situation like that, your nervous system is already probably trying to protect you, right? Maybe you have a dry mouth, your heart is beating really quickly. And so when your body is in that fight or flight state, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to think on your feet and do what you need to do to defend yourself, right? So if you ask me, I don't think that you should talk it out with the person, the abusive person, the environment, or whatnot. And again, it could be difficult for you, and everyone is going to have their own situation where they feel like, they may want to act differently. So I'm just putting that out there as a guideline. I have found that when you draw a boundary like that, it is very important that you do what you need to do to keep that boundary. And we keep those boundaries by our actions, not by what we say. So we can say, um, all these things, right? But the way that a boundary is enforced and communicated is by your actions. And so by you not returning, you are saying, I am not going to do this. I'm not going to have this conversation. I'm not going to do it, right? And that is your choice. Now, there may be some situations where you may want to, right? And there may be some circumstances where it's correct, but I feel in general that the most powerful form of communication is silence and setting that boundary and keeping that boundary. So I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Have you dealt with this before? Have you had an invitation to come back and talk it out? And if so, how did you handle it? Did you go back? Did you not go back? What would you tell somebody who is in a similar situation? So I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with joy and peace. And if you would like a free consultation, you can go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, and click on the orange button. Thank you. Bye-bye.